Thank you, guys. Okay, so I see that most of the tables are filling up right now, which is good. I was a little bit worried. I heard there was a big pool party last night, so which I missed. So my name is CZ. I'm the CEO of Binance. So let me talk a little bit about Binance, a little bit about Korea, and a little bit about the future. First of all, how many people used Binance before? Still raise your hands? Okay, so I don't really need to talk too much about Binance. I'll talk about Binance together with Korea. I think I saw a survey that Binance had 40% of the people in Korea prefer Binance as the most preferred exchange. And that's the highest preference out of all the samples they asked. I think second place is some other exchange and then smaller. So I was very pleased to see that. And given that we actually don't support the fiat currency, so I think Korea, we have a very large, very large user base in Korea. I want to explain a little bit. So the question I get asked very often is, why did Binance grow so quickly? So I will explain a little bit about that. I think there's a few different reasons. Number one, we were very lucky. So I think luck plays a big part of it. Number two is our product and service I'm very confident we are probably one of the best in the industry. And we have a lot of room to grow in that area. But I think from a product speed, from service, we're in this industry right now, we're probably one of the leading ones. But I think most importantly, which is the third factor, is our value system. We do everything properly. We do everything ethically. So I think this is a very strong, there's a very strong value in that. I think this is a very strong factor for our success. And I would like to invite all of our considered competitors or everybody in the industry to copy us on that. So they can copy us on our product, copy us on the business model, copy us on our coin model. But I think most importantly, I want to invite all the other exchanges and every other business in this industry to copy us on the ethical values that we hold. So we always want to protect users. And we always want to do the right thing. And sometimes that involves a lot of very, very difficult decisions. But in the long run, I think that always pays well. So some of the things we do, for example, whenever we feel that a decision helps a user, even if we make that decision at our loss, we will do it. So we reject so there's a myth that many projects pay a very high listing fee for Binance. We actually don't charge a very high listing fee. So that's a myth. Speaking about that, I'll talk a little bit about listing, because that's how many people want to list on Binance, have a project? Quite a few. Not as many as our users, but quite a few. So listing on Binance is really tricky, because typically you submit a web form and you hear nothing, which is the norm. One of the things I have actually adjusted is I would recommend, if you don't hear anything, submit again in a couple of weeks and update Binance Info. So right now we have a platform called Binance Info that has information about coins. If you update it every 1 or 2 weeks, that's usually a very strong indicator for us that you're working relatively actively on your project, and that will help your listing quite a bit. We do not have a contact person. Many people ask me for a contact person for Binance listing. There's several reasons for it. If we provide a contact, that person's email box will just get flooded. It's the same thing as the form. It's not going to help you very much. And we don't allow outside contact for the first round of reviews, because we don't want biased influence. So let me talk a little bit about Korea. So it's very comforting to know now Jeju is now supposedly allowing ICOs. So I think Korea's regulations have gone back and forth a little bit from the exchanges, not allowing exchanges and shutting down exchanges, and now they're being in favor of exchanges. Korea has a very unique market landscape. I think there's probably more than 100% penetration in Korea market for cryptocurrency. I think almost everybody holds some type of crypto, which is good because Korea is also a democratic country. So there's a voting system going on. Any politician that doesn't support cryptocurrency probably will not have a job. So that's very comforting. And but at the same time, I think the Korea so far have not made any clear regulations regarding cryptocurrency. So there's not a law about exchanges. Now Jeju has a kind of a indication about ICOs, but I don't think it's passed into law yet. It's good and bad. So the good thing is, well, let's say the potential risk for many countries is they want to be first, but then they become too strict. That's not good. Or if they make, even if the regulation is too loose, that might not be good either. So there's a very fine line to be drawn. When you start later, you have the advantage of learning from others, right? So learning from other people's mistakes. I think there's someone from Malta here. Alex from Malta is here. So Malta is one of the really advanced countries, and their regulations are quite good. So I would encourage anybody to, any of the regulators to look at Malta and try to copy that. Hopefully a little bit looser would be even better. And Binance's strategy in Korea, I can make it very clearly, is we care about the Korean market very much. But right now, so far, I think our current strategy is we will not touch Korean won for the short future. There's a few other exchanges that's trying in the Korea space. We want them to go first. So we'll probably be the second tranche if they can figure it out. So in Korea, we'll continue. Well, we don't really have a strong presence in Korea. We have a couple community members in Korea now. So we do have a Korean Telegram group, and it's very active. So if anybody have any questions, I'm hoping that very soon we can support Korean customer support. So that's a key differentiator. Right now our website supports Korean language, but we want to be able to provide Korean customer support. The next topic I want to touch up on is there's a lot of questions about centralized versus decentralized exchanges. So I foresee that in the next few years, both will coexist, and in the next few years, the centralized one will be bigger. And over time, they may shift when the technology gets better for the decentralized exchanges. We are working on a decentralized exchange ourselves. I'm hoping to see a prototype in a couple of months. So that's coming. And decentralized exchanges will not replace centralized exchanges in the short term. So there's a lot of questions about that. Decentralized exchanges have a few benefits. The exchange does not hold custody of your coin, so you hold your coin yourself, which can be good and can be bad for some people. There's many people who does not, if you're not technology savvy, you may not be able to hold your coins as secure as a centralized exchange, actually. But centralized exchanges are a primary target for hackers. So we do take a lot of hits, and we do take a lot of measures against hackers. Decentralized exchanges also give you the benefit of being more anonymous. So it's just an address transferring to another, exchanging with another address, which is good. So for people using those things, then decentralized exchange is probably better. But then today, the decentralized exchanges are slower and they're more expensive. So given that, the liquidity will always be worse. And when the liquidity is worse, it gets really expensive for trading. So we are working very actively on the decentralized exchange. I think maybe 5, 10, however many years later, decentralized exchanges will overtake centralized ones, and we want to be there to disrupt ourselves. So many people view us as just a centralized exchange, but we are working on the decentralized exchange as well. And I think ours is will probably be one of the faster ones. We focus more on speed than features. So in my belief, that speed is very important for having large liquidity. Speaking on that as well, so we have Binance Labs, head of Binance Labs, Ella, is in the audience. So if you guys have a project that's looking for funding, it's much better to find Ella than finding myself. Ella's team, I think there's 3 or 4 members here, they look at projects. I unfortunately don't have a lot of time to look at projects. So many people ask me, like, what's my typical day like? My typical day does not involve me looking at white papers. So I typically do not have time to look at white papers. I still spend majority of my time on the centralized exchange, which is still our core business. There are lots of issues going on, lots of different stuff happening. We're always releasing new features. we're doing new promotion events. So I'm more involved on the technical and operational side. I'm actually less public-facing, counter to what most people think. I do spend, I try to limit my time on Twitter to 15 minutes or less a day. So usually 5 minutes each. So I just blast off a few tweets and then just go back to work. So if you have a project that's looking for funding, you should find Binance Labs. If you have a project looking for listing, the web form is really your friend. And Binance, you should fill out the information on Binance info. I'll talk a little bit about the ICOs. So I really don't, actually the market in general. As I said in my article that I just published about a week ago, I really don't understand why people think we are in a bear market. And actually, given a week ago, the price was kind of declining over the last quarter, which completely does not make sense to me because all the data I look at indicates we should be in a rising market. If you look at the amount of ICOs that's done in this year so far, I think some other analysis put us at $14 billion raised so far this year. So that's more than quadruple what we raised in 2017 up till now. So there's 4 times more money coming into this industry just from ICOs alone. And given that amount of money, the price should be going up, not down, which they've turned in the last week. So I think actually the price started going up before I published the article, and then it just kept going up. And also, we see a lot more institutional investments made into this space. We get so much requests for institutional account verifications, KYC, and also just big buyer orders. I think the largest buyer order I've heard to date coming directly to me was they want to buy 500,000 Bitcoins. And I scratch my head. It's like, how do I give you 500,000 Bitcoins? So there's a lot of big buying orders. So I don't know why price is dropping. And also, I think right now we're in a very fortunate place where different countries are now competing for blockchain businesses, thanks to Malta. So I think Malta is one of the really advanced ones, and Malta has enjoyed the benefits of many blockchain businesses going there. I know one project sitting here probably raised $66 million in the last month or so. So this is just one of the projects that's there. So I think any country who's pro-ICO can attract a lot of foreign, FDI in a lot of countries, foreign direct investments. I think there's no other investments that's more direct from fundraising. So I think any country that does not allow ICOs are missing out big time. So I think the regulations are really favorable now. I think 3 or 4 months ago, people perceived 2018 is going to be the regulation year, and regulations viewed as a risk. But I think right now they're viewed as a positive thing. So they have to make positive regulations to attract our businesses. And then I'll talk, I think I have 7 minutes left. So one last topic, which is the future. So I foresee there will be millions of coins. I don't know when. I'll just say 1 million coin sooner or later. I think given that view, basically I think every country will issue a coin. Every project, every province, every person, everything, you can tokenize it. So there will be millions of coins, and we should be ready for it. And when you have millions of coins, exchanges play a very, very important role. And I think right now, today, most of the exchange systems cannot handle that many coins. We can't really. We can handle a lot more transaction volume, but I don't know how to handle 1 million coins just yet. But I think we should get ready for that future very soon. And we also want to, one of Binance's missions is we want to reach out to the rest of the world. So it's not just the developed countries like Korea, like United States, like China. We want to touch upon every part of the world. And I think especially in some of the less developed part of the world, there's more chances of using blockchain, using cryptocurrency directly. So that's why we're in Africa, that's why we're in a lot of other less developed countries. So hopefully, we can, one of the goals we set for our internal team is basically 1 billion users, 1.2 billion users for the Binance group. That pretty much represents another 100x growth. So today we're just shy of 10 million users, so we got to grow another 100 times more. That's our goal. So that's pretty much everything I want to share. I do have 5 more minutes left. If there's any questions, I can take a question from the audience. There's one. You can yeah, I'll repeat your question.
May I interrupt, please? We have to use the microphone.
Oh,
Just
sorry.
please wait for a second for the translation for other participants.
Okay.
Would you please hand over the microphone to the person in front so that he could pose a question? Right. That man in the front table. Yes.
My name is Steve. I'm from Block Tower. I have a question on how the exchanges relate to the bank. So I saw the news. You guys had a small stake in the decentralized bank in Malta, and then Litecoin recently have took some stake in some German bank. And based on my source, there are a big move in Japan that a lot of big corporations and banks are trying to take some stake in exchanges. So I think the traditional bank is trying to kind of dominate the cryptocurrency is not good. But also I see that there's some collaboration or some sort of like the work together that a lot of exchange or the cryptocurrency people are trying to do. So what's your view on like the exchange and banks, how these things are developed?
Sure. So I think basically for any new industry, like blockchain cryptocurrency is the new financial fintech industry. Any new industry will condense the layers in the traditional industries. So we're going to condense banks, security brokers, and many other different layers. They will be much condensed. And it's very good to see some of the banks trying to enter our space now. A lot of the financial institutions are changing their business models or at least trying to enter this space, which is very good. But I think fundamentally, the new industry is going to compact, bring everything into one. So for example, if you look at the crypto exchange space, we are the exchange. There's no brokers because basically consumers, investment banks and large trading firms use the exchange directly. So the broker concept is kind of removed. There's no underwriters, so we handle the listing ourselves. The projects talk to us directly. So a lot of those layers are now condensed into one. Typically, in the traditional space, you got to pay 7% of your listing to the underwriter. It costs about 7–10%, which is extremely costly. And people complain about 0.01% listing fee basically today on the crypto space. So it's actually much cheaper. Yeah, so I think basically the space is going to get condensed, and a lot of people use the exchange even as a wallet. So many users they fear that they cannot secure their own computer, so they actually use the centralized exchange. Every time they want to pay something, they add a new withdrawal address and pay that, which actually creates a lot of headache for us because for our security purposes, every time you have a new address, we are not sure if your account is hacked or not, so we got to protect it. So, all of those things are being more condensed. How exactly the industry is going to develop, I'm not too sure, to be honest. Yeah, but it's getting compact. Yeah. I think I probably have time for one more question for this gentleman over here.
Hi, good morning. My name is Stephen Lara. You mentioned that there has been more money invested in ICO this year than last year at this stage already. However, there is still a dearth in terms of working applications in blockchain space. Is it something of a concern to you, and how do you think this is going to evolve in the long term?
Sure. So the ICOs this year, unfortunately, each ICO is getting a lot bigger. I wrote an article on this before. I personally really don't like big ICOs. I like smaller ICOs. Big ICOs create a few different problems, especially from an exchange perspective. If you raise a $500 million ICO, valuation-wise, right, without a product, it's very hard to hold that value. So when you list on exchange, the price is going to drop. When the price does this, most users who bought at the top are losing money. We really don't like to see that. So for big ICOs, unless you have a very strong product, a very large user base, we think it's very hard to hold the value. So we typically are very cautious about listing big ICOs. We like small ICOs where you have a small valuation and then you develop your product, develop your user base, and then the valuation goes up. So unfortunately, that's going in the direction I don't want to see this year. Each ICO is getting bigger. And there's not I want to see a large amount of ICOs and each one being smaller. And if that happens, then quite a lot of them will fail. That's just the nature of startup businesses. So we would expect somewhere between at least over 50% failure rate. But what we should really focus on is the economic benefits of the 10 to 20% that are successful. So I think basically last year there was a lot of ICOs, and I think in the next quarter or two, we're going to see a lot more products, really real products coming out of the 10% or 20% that are successful. And we're going to see a lot more interesting chance, a lot more interesting other projects. And also the security tokens will also help quite a bit because many businesses doesn't really require blockchain, right? Even the centralized exchanges, we don't really require making a new blockchain unless we make a decentralized exchange. But we can still issue a token, and that token still represents some value. So I think a lot of those tokens will come out, which will help projects quite a bit. So yeah, I think a number of the projects will fail, but I think in the next 2 quarters, we're going to see a lot more projects that are going to be successful. That should be very interesting. I think I'm out of time. So thank you very much for having me, and hopefully we'll make Binance Korea much bigger. Thank you.